Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. So I was asked to just talk a little bit about our journey with starting a sustainability program. So I've been here about 7.5 years, and I was the first person hired at Vans with sustainability in my title. So hopefully I have a little bit of expertise in that area. So the first thing I think that's the most important is thinking about your brand purpose. So why does your brand exist? And I know there are some of you right now that are thinking, to make money, right? If you are in business to make money, you are in trouble. Business is not here to make money. We make money so that we can further our purpose and so that we can exist. So if you don't have a brand purpose, that's where you need to start, because everything else is not going to work if you don't have a brand purpose. When I came to Vans, we had a brand purpose, which is the same as it is today. I'll read it just so you guys in the back can hear it. Our purpose is to enable creative self-expression and inspire youth culture by celebrating and encouraging the off-the-wall attitude that comes from expressing your true self. So that's why we exist. We make money so that we can continue to do this. What does sustainability have to do with that? So that's the next step. Once you have a brand purpose, some brands, their purpose is sustainability. Hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn, but I think probably the next two speakers, their brands are in business specifically around sustainability. That wasn't the case for Vans, but there is a way to tie sustainability to your brand purpose. So for us, I really focused in on the youth culture piece. If we're in business to inspire youth culture and we care about kids and youth, we should care about their future. So as part of our commitment to inspire youth culture, we recognize that we have to protect the planet and its resources for future generations. So that then rolls down to the objective of our sustainability program, which is to embody the Van Doren spirit and bring Van's purpose to life through sustainability programs that engage consumers and employees. So that's our objective. How do we actually do that? This might be a wonky word, but governance is super important. So who decides what we work on? If you think about all the things that Derek talked about, should we care about biodiversity? Should we care about water pollution? There's a million things we can look at. What are the most important things? So we have a few different groups that kind of inform how we actually tackle things. So the first and probably the most important one is the steering committee. So the steering committee is comprised of 6 global executives, including our 2 product executives, including Vicki, Vicki Redding, our who heads up our apparel team. And they really decide what the guiding principles are. They help me set my focus each year. We meet 3 times a year, and then I give them monthly email updates. But executives are important. Obviously, you need executive support to do things, but we also want to involve from the bottom up. So we do have a global working group that's comprised of interested employees from every region. So this is global. We have employees in our Asia region as well as our European region. And they're really to be kind of the champions of sustainability in their regions and communicate our efforts globally. We do monthly calls with them. And then lastly, I think probably everyone here knows that Vans is part of VF, conglomerate of brands. So VF has their own goals and way that they look at sustainability. So 2 to 3 times a year, I meet with my counterparts at the other brands as part of what we call the Sustainability and Responsibility Council. So their job is really to set enterprise-wide goals, which I'll share with you in a minute. They provide foundational policies and tools. So like it wouldn't make sense for each brand within VF to have a way that we measure our carbon footprint, for example. So they provide the tools that go across brands. Also policies, so we have For example, a policy on animal-derived materials. How do we treat animals in our supply chain? It wouldn't make sense for each brand to develop their own, so it's a VF-wide policy. And then they also provide us with resources in terms of people as well as money sometimes to implement programs. We have monthly calls and we meet a couple times a year. So now that we know what our brand purpose is, how sustainability relates to that, and then how we manage sustainability internally, what are our guiding principles? So the first one is really around how we talk about sustainability, both internally and externally. We think it's really important to acknowledge that we don't know everything and to be very humble about our approach to sustainability. So we acknowledge challenges that we're having. We're not doing everything right. We don't think that we're ever going to be perfect. This is going to be a continual journey for us, but we do strive for continuous improvement. And then on the issue of transparency, which I'm glad Derek mentioned, we are committed to increasing the transparency of the impacts we have, both good and bad, to our consumers. And when we think about what issues we really want to get behind, we picked 4. The first one is climate change. I know there was a lot of information in Derek's presentation, but climate change is by far our biggest challenge and the most important thing that we can tackle. So if you have a sustainability program that doesn't take a stand on climate change, it's probably not a very good one. I've never seen one that doesn't have climate change. Plastics, obviously this is a big issue in this industry. And then for us, being the Van Doren Rubber Company, that was our original name, was the Van Doren Rubber Company. We are really interested in sourcing sustainable rubber and taking a stand on that. And then something that should be applicable to this group as well is ocean and coastal protection. Okay, so those are our guiding principles. Another thing that we think about is VF. So I mentioned that there are public goals. So you can go on the website and actually look at these. You probably can't read them from here. But we set goals at the end of 2017. A few that I'll point out. Number 1, we have a goal to hit 100% renewable energy at all of our owned and operated facilities by 2025. One that I'll talk about in a little more detail is science-based targets. I think that's on the term sheet, correct, Derek? So I won't go completely into what that is, but basically this is a target that science tells us that we have to reduce our emissions by in order to keep the planet from increasing in temperature by 2 degrees. So very, very ambitious. It takes a lot of work to actually even set the targets. So we set a goal that we would set the targets by the end of this year. So those are in development right now. And then on the materials side, we have a goal to reduce the impact of our materials by 35% by 2025. And then 50% of nylon and polyester will be recycled by 2025 as well. There are others, but those are kind of the key ones. So given all of that, what are our focuses? Like, what do I do every day? What is my job? So what we do, we tackle climate change, we tackle plastic, we look for sustainable rubber and incorporating that into our supply chain, and we work on increasing transparency of our impacts. So those are kind of my 4 key focus areas. And then underlying all of that is internal and external communication. So I think it's kind of up to the brand, but for us, we really wanted to really focus internally first before we went out and talked about it externally. As time has gone on, we've talked more and more about it externally, but it's super important to get your employees on board. So this is what we do, and then how do we actually do it? So I just break it up this way. You can break it up any way you want, but kind of how do we put these things into practice? We do that in our operations. So this building, our retail stores, our events, our distribution center, we tackle those 4 topics there. Product, obviously, is super important. And then communication. So I think this is a poster from an internal panel discussion we had on plastic pollution a few years ago. So those are the ways that I do things. So I'll just go into a little bit of a little more detail on each one of those 4 focus areas, so you get kind of an idea of how this actually works. When you say tackle climate change, that's pretty large, and like, how does this actually work in practice? So the goal is TBD because we are developing our science-based targets. So by the end of this year, we will have those in place. But in the meantime, we're still tackling climate change in a couple ways. So for example, I'm sure you all noticed, this building is run by solar. We have EV charging stations that are free for employees to use. Those both have a lot of carbon benefit. We offset 100% of our operational emissions at our 2 big surf events every year, the US Open and the Vans Triple Crown of Surfing. Sustainable materials have a huge climate benefit. When you compare the carbon footprint of a recycled cotton versus virgin cotton, for example, pretty large reduction in climate impact. Or recycled polyester versus virgin, I think it's 35% reduction in carbon impact from just using recycled materials. And as Derek showed in his presentation, that's actually where the majority of our impact comes from, is in materials and manufacturing. So, and that's where Clean by Design, the Clean by Design program comes. So our sourcing teams work with our factories to implement energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. So that's climate. Plastics. This is something that's becoming more and more of a hot topic because it's so visible, right? We can see it. So the goal with plastics is basically to eliminate what we don't need and to make sure what we do use doesn't end up in the environment somewhere. That it gets recycled, it gets reused, it gets composted. So we've done a few things on this. Right now, we're right in the middle, actually, of creating a global plastic footprint. So looking at where we use plastic in every part of our value chain, from here in the office, to our distribution center, to our supply chain, to our retail stores, and really understanding what the opportunities are to do some of the things that we laid out in the goal. Eliminate what we don't need, or do we really need that many poly bags? Can we use less plastic in our poly bags, et cetera? Retail, so we have a reusable bag program at retail where we sell a reusable bag and a portion of the proceeds goes to a nonprofit. And then this year, actually, this is brand new actually, this is like 3 weeks old. So at the US Open this year in our VIP area, we didn't use any single-use plastics at all. We actually had all reusable. So there's some pictures of that there. So that's plastics. Sustainable rubber is a new and developing area for us. And so we actually signed on very recently to a statement from Forest Stewardship Council, which has a certification for sustainable rubber, basically saying that we're committed to sourcing certified rubber. And this spurred the need to have a policy for sustainable rubber VF-wide. We're obviously the biggest user of rubber in VF, but we wanted to extend it to all the brands. So we're right now in the middle of developing what does sustainable rubber mean? Is it just FSC certified rubber? Are there other requirements that we want to put on there? Are there other certifications we can use, et cetera? And then once we have that, the goal is to have all of our rubber meet those requirements. So that's rubber. And then transparency is also fairly new for us, but something that we're super committed to, and it's gonna be awesome once we start rolling some of this stuff out. So in 2017, at the end of 2017, we actually released, and you can go look at this now, a map, a full supply chain map of our checkerboard slip-on. So this is actually lives on the VF Sustainability Report website, which is probably why none of you have seen it, because no one goes to that website. But it is available, and you can see basically every single factory that we use, every single mill we use, every single yarn supplier we use, every single rubber supplier that we use. And there's a little bit of information in there on some of the environmental benefits that we get from using those suppliers, or social benefits. So we're committed to continuing to roll out maps, including 5 by the end of this fiscal year, which for us ends in March. So we'll have 5 more products mapped, including, I think, 2 apparel products and a backpack. And we're also committed to making it easier for the consumer to understand and reach these maps. So right now, like I said, they live on the VF website, but no consumer knows who VF is. So we're going to put the maps on our website and make them branded bands and make them. Taking you through basic, just thought I'd mention a few things that we're doing that are coming 80%. So we need to use 30% recycled cotton by 2025. That would be what that would look like. We're going to implement an offset program, a carbon offset program for our employees next year. I know many of you have heard about the sustainable poly bag that we're going to be using starting in spring of next year. It's a thinner bag, and it uses more sustainable bio-based plastic, so it reduces the carbon footprint as well as the plastic amount that we use. I won't take questions now because I know we're going to have a panel discussion, but think about what questions you have, and can't wait to hear them.